Hello, photo class, and welcome to the next project for you all that I'm going to talk about today. And the subject we are talking about is lighting. Lighting is the most important thing needed to take a picture. I know I've brought this up before, but I really can't preface it enough. It is basically what it's all about, and I'm going to show you some examples about how being really purposeful with your lighting will have really powerful implications with your photography. So of course, you can go to the website, right, at sakuraphoto1.blogspot.com, click on the Light project, and you'll have some resources there in case you forget what you're supposed to be doing for the project. This one's going to involve 5 photos rather than 4. But let me get to the specifics. I try to start off with this truth every year that lighting really is the only thing that matters when you're taking pictures. Everything else is secondary. The word photography has its origins from the Greek meaning drawing with light. It's when we were talking about the definitions of photography last week, that came up, and I really, again, it's so huge. You don't need a camera to take pictures. You just need light. It's why that should be the focus of your photography first and foremost. And I'll show you some examples at the end of students who have taken pictures in which the lighting is really what they're focused on. And the difference between a really great photographer and a good photographer is their relationship with light. A great photographer always looks at light as the main subject, the first subject. Let me just show you some examples of what I'm talking about before getting to the specifics. So here's a picture where light is the subject of the photo. And it's just a great example of how light shining on things has a lot of different effects and different types of light, and reflecting light, ambient light, high contrast light, direct light, and soft light can kind of come together into a picture to create all these different effects. Lighting is also why you can take a picture that looks like this, in which you have a soft lit. This is a soft light picture in which you see a lot of details. It's not overwhelming if you think about that last picture. Notice you could see, there aren't strong shadows. It's all kind of even for the most part, and we could see a lot of details. You see a lot of details in the hair. You see a lot of details in his face. You see his freckles. You see his wrinkles. All the details of his face are really evident with this nice soft light. And you can contrast that with a picture like this, where you have a direct light, not soft, it's hard, it's intense, right? So you have high contrast situations where you go from very bright to very kind of dark in shadow pretty quickly. So this is a very bright, hard lit photograph, okay? Another example of hard light would be this one here, where you have a lot of contrast. It's the middle of the day. The sun is shining very bright. It's afternoon. It's just directly hitting the subject. There's no clouds in the way. And you end up that where the main surface of the light is hitting is very bright and overexposed. And then you have kind of dark shadows going into the other areas. So that's a high contrast photo, and it's often a result of direct or hard light. Sometimes direct or hard light is actually what we're going for. Notice the shadows in this picture. We have, again, pretty much midday, very intense light coming through those windows, but they're creating these really awesome shadows. So we have high contrast where you have a very dark element in the piece and a very bright element in the piece. The values are going from bright to dark very quickly. But this is also a backlit photograph. So you have a little bit of the backlight kind of playing, and I'll talk about that in a little bit because we're shooting towards the light. So the light is coming at us. It's between essentially what is our subject and, or it's behind what is our subject. And the subject is between ourselves and the light. And you end up getting these really great shadows. Keep in mind, because shadows are a really important part of this project, actually. Just want to bring this up. It popped up when we were looking at it. Here's another good example to just show you the different elements involved in light. And you can see just moving the light around Positioning the light in a different way has profound impacts on the subject. Look at it's the same subject, almost the same pose in most of the pictures, but notice how just moving the light around or even maybe adding a light can really change the result of the picture. Adding color lights as well really has a huge impact in that bottom right corner. But you can see that this almost looks like a different person in each picture, right? So you're seeing really right there in front of your eyes the impact that lighting has and just subtle variations of it, moving it from here to here to here, all those things. Where is the light coming from? Something you need to think about when you're doing this project. Sometimes we don't want shadows. That last image showed an example with the light coming through that building, showed some shadows we want. You know, maybe in this case, the shadows were purposely put there, but notice how there are deep shadows under her face. This is actually because we have a direct hard light that's shining directly on the subject. And when you have a direct hard light shining on the subject, you end up going from bright to dark very quickly. So you have like highlights and then you just have shadows and there's no details in between. So you get these shadows under this person's eyes. You get the shadows around the cheeks and under the face as well because it's a hard direct light. Versus a picture like this that is soft light. So that means it's diffused. It means that maybe you're thinking like it's a sunny day, but there are clouds between the light and the subject. And clouds are a natural diffuser for the light. They create, you know, a shield that diffuses the light into different directions. So you end up with something like this. That's a nice, even, soft light. It's bright still, but it's softer, it's diffused, it's not hard and direct, okay? Sometimes shadows are great, and we really want those shadows. Again, one of the elements of the assignment is going to be using shadows in a purposeful way. This is using shadows in a very, you know, interesting, fun, creative way, and you have someone standing next to a window. Think a lot about how you can use windows in this project. And the light is coming through as a screen, and there's little dots shining on his face. So this is actually using light in a very purposeful way. It uses shadows in a very purposeful way to create a texture, an interesting pattern on the subject's face. Here's another example of backlight. I brought that up a little bit ago. And this is when you have light that is behind the subject. So the subject is between yourself, you know, the subject is here, and then the light is behind. Okay, and the light is shining through, you know, from behind the subject onto the camera, you know, into the camera sensor, and you get what's called a backlight effect. This is a bright backlit picture because the light is actually still soft. And when light is soft, it'll bounce off of other things and wrap around things a little bit easier. So you have a backlight, you know, we have, this is the golden hour. We have the sunset or it's sunrise, you know, sometimes you can't tell. And you also end up, when the sun is like kind of weaker like that, when you have a backlight, you don't get a total silhouette. And I'll show you an example of a silhouette in a second. You get this nice rim light. So you can see around the girl's hair, around the pony, there's kind of a glow coming around, right? And that is rim lighting, and it's often an effect of backlight. But this would be a nice example of like a soft backlight. Versus this, which is a hard backlight. So the light is coming really intensely directly into the camera, and you end up with a silhouette. You don't really get the glow, although this has some light rays that are being created by the image as well, which is fun and a great element and texture that comes out of an effect that comes out of backlight. But this is a more silhouetted type of backlight, right? Again, the subject is between you and the light, so the light is coming directly at you. The more direct that light is shining into the camera, the more intense you're going to end up with a silhouette, and the more chance you'll have for the effect of light rays. Lighting can be a really powerful thing in photography. It's the most powerful thing. Think about all the different ways that you can use light in interesting ways. This light is obviously taken this shot is actually taken at nighttime, and you have street lights. The sun is the most powerful source of light, but other lights can be really interesting and create interesting effects as well. And so when you have like street lights, you end up with this kind of like spotlight. And it has a very different feel than the sunlight. It has more of an artificial feel versus sunlight, which is natural lighting. but again, can be used in really interesting and powerful ways. This is another example of using light in a very interesting and powerful, purposeful way. And this is maybe a projector light of some sort or a flashlight, but there's a color put over it. But this is a person that is using light as the subject, as an interesting element that tells a story, is a symbolic element in the photograph. And I really want to push you to try to start seeing light in this way, to use it in these kinds of contexts. Here's another example of someone using light in a very purposeful, powerful way. So we have these, limited light. Limited light is shining through something, and you're getting kind of a spotlight effect, and it's breaking through these holes, and then you have the person reaching into it. So how can you get the subject to interact with that light to really create a very powerful, moving photograph? And I've brought this up before, but turning a photo black and white often allows us to pay more attention to the light rather than the colors. Not saying you have to do that, though. So let's get to the subject. Your assignment is to do 5 pictures. The first one, and I talked about it, is direct or hard light. So you're going to end up with shadows. The light should be going basically directly onto the subject in a very powerful, strong way. Maybe it's a little bit overexposed. Let me show you an example of the difference between hard light and soft light. It's not necessarily that one is bad or good. It's just that one has a different effect. So I showed you that one picture where they purposely wanted the shadows under the person's eyes. This is a direct light. So it's afternoon, the light is shining from the sky. It's very bright, there's no clouds, and it's coming directly on the subject, and you're ending up with these shadows here, right? Versus soft light. So in this case, they probably put a sheet of some sort over the person, where the light, so the sunlight has to go through this diffuser. This soft box is often what it's referred to as, and it diffuses that light and makes it softer. In a natural setting, that would be clouds, right? So imagine that this is a picture taken at the exact same time of the day without clouds. This is that same picture maybe with clouds. So you can see more of the details. It's even more across the subject, and you get far less shadows, even though there's still shadows, right, in the areas that you want them, and you can see details. So soft light will often help you see more details. So there's another example of the difference between hard and soft here. Here you have a soft lit person. Here we have more hard light. There's more shadows on the face. We're not seeing all the details. The lighting isn't as even, right? So there's some more examples on the page. You'll see them. Here's a hard light, side light example where the light is shining really hard on the side of the face. So you get a lot of shadows, right? It doesn't wrap around. If you had a softer light in this case, it would probably wrap around. You would see some more details on the other side of the face. So hard light, your first part of the project. You could do it in any order you want. And then soft light or diffused light. And these are 2 examples of more of soft light. There's not a lot of intense shadows on this person's face. It's probably cloudy out. Here's another example with clouds, and you see more of the details. That's the natural way to get this. You can hold up sheets in front of windows, like sheer white sheets will naturally diffuse light. And sometimes you can get it to bounce off of things. So if you're standing next to a very reflective surface and you have a window with bright light shining coming into it, it might bounce off of that surface and then light your subject in a more soft way. There's different ways to do that. Side light is another one of the assignments. And it's, pretty self-explanatory. It's light that's coming from the side of your subject. When we talk about light in this way, it's always about the direction that it's hitting the subject in. So this is light coming from the side. And what you end up with is, kind of a split light effect is what it's called, where you have one side that's lit and the other side that's in shadow. This was a really good example of it, where the lighting is coming directly through the middle of the face. We call that split lighting. A great way to take this picture is to put a subject next to the window and just use the sunlight that's coming in from the window. Sometimes you can get some really cool effects with reflections as well. So side light, it doesn't have to come from a window, even though I say that here, side light from a window. I'm just saying that it's a good way to use it. But you can use any type of side light if you want. Maybe you want to go outside and use at nighttime and use your car's headlights. The next part of the project is to use shadows or purposeful limited light. I showed you a lot of examples where the light was coming through like the holes, putting the patterns of like a lot of dots on a person's face, or the girl that was laying on the ground and the light was shining through. That is limited light. So a spotlight would be a limited light. That one with like the projector coming, through, I showed you, that would be a limited light. Or shadows. So you can do shadows, or you can kind of use limited light in a very purposeful way. And the thing that I want you to do here is, again, I want you to really think about how can you use these things in a very meaningful and purposeful way. So here you have kind of like a spotlight that's coming through just a small area, lighting up this subject, which is the person. Here you have a lot of shadows at play. And if you shoot later in the day or earlier in the day, when the sun is closer to setting, you're going to get more extreme shadows because that sun is on an angle versus being, directly up in the sky. And then some of these images were shot by photographer Janwei Yang. He has a lot of really cool pictures using limited and shadows. You should check him out, do some research. And then the final part of this project, and I've brought this up a number of times, is backlight. So again, that's when the light is behind the subject, coming towards the camera, and you can get different effects like that. So this one, the light is very low, it's very dim, and you're getting a little bit of a soft light. They might be holding actually up a reflector that's reflecting that light that's coming from behind back onto the subject so that you can see them a little bit better. But you often end up getting a silhouette situation like this. And more of a rim lighting here. You have a little bit of a rim happening in this bottom one, but you can go for either one. You could try to do more of a silhouette that's going to be more intense, higher contrast, or you can go for more of a soft backlight. It's up to you. So what I want you to do, Google bad lighting photographs and just like think, what do they look like? What is some of the elements that what are some of the elements that are obvious in bad photographs? And then here are some student examples that you can look at later as well. These are all students that were kind of like using light in a very purposeful way. Here's someone at the aquarium using light, the light coming from the aquarium, and you got the jellyfish in the background. Got a backlight situation kind of happening there. Very powerful photograph. This photographer, his concentration as an AP photographer was light, and it was his main subject that he was always shooting. Here he is coming outside of a window, and again, you have all that intense sunlight outside of the window, but the inside of the house isn't being lit as much, so you end up with a nice contrast coming there, but I love the glow that is emitting from the person as they're emerging from the window. Same photographer here, using light coming from a window. That's a hand grabbing at the windowsill. Some soft light here, but it's also kind of got a little bit of that rim lighting going on. Here's a great example of beauty light. Beauty light is when you have a nice even light that's coming from all over. So a lot of times what they do is they'll have two soft light fixtures coming from the different directions of the face, hitting it evenly so it's nice and even. This photographer actually built a soft box in her basement that she could sit in. So it was a box, that she had a door and she had white paper, sheer paper around all of it, and she would have lights behind each area of the door shining in, so you get all this soft light that's lighting her evenly, and that's a good example of beauty light. Here's someone using Christmas lights in a very interesting way. That would be a good example of purposeful lighting. Someone using a lamp. You kind of got a limited light. You got some shadows playing out there. This is that photographer from above whose subject was lighting. He actually carried this lamp out into the forest to take this picture. And again, the light is almost becoming a part of the subject, and that's him. He does a lot of self-portraits. Some more limited, purposeful light coming in, looking, this is like a stairway up from a subway, and the light is shining down from outside. This is obviously like a deck or a wooden porch of some sort, and the light is shining through the different cracks. Notice how she got the light to go directly over her eye. That was on purpose. So this is the challenge to you, to kind of use light in all these different ways to take 5 pictures: backlight, shadows or purposeful limited light, side light, soft light, and direct light. Now, keep in mind that the side lights, the shadows, the backlight, those can be soft light or hard light. It's up to you. You make that choice. Good luck with everything. Have fun, and ask me any questions if you have them. Cheers.